Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and in this one, we're going to be talking about the White Wolf stuff like Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse and Changeling the Dreaming, as well as some Doctor Who related stuff. And honestly, just this one's all over the place. This one is weird. So before we get into that, make sure you smash that like button, check to see if you're still subscribed, and as always, leave us a comment. We love hearing from you guys, and we have an awesome community here. So thank you so much for being here. So that said, let's dive in. The prologue to this one is kind of a recap of an earlier game that I uploaded that was set in 1983, and it involved a girl named Kitsune, who was a fox related character, and a guy named Rad, who was a big burly dude who had gotten a job as a bartender in early 80s London, England, and he had amnesia. He also had a different accent, like he didn't belong there for some reason. And it turned out that outside of his bar was this pop machine that was out of order. And so they search the pop machine eventually at the end of that adventure and find out it's a TARDIS. And it works for Rad. So he has some sort of a connection to this TARDIS, but because he has amnesia, he has no idea what that is. And so both of those characters get in the TARDIS, and so Kitsune is curious about what the future holds. And she doesn't want to go too far into the future because she's worried about there maybe being a nuclear war or something like that, and doesn't want to just appear in a place and die. So they decide to jump forward 10 years and kind of take baby steps, right? So they go from 1983 to 1993. And we ran an adventure then, which we are getting into like main plot stuff now. We ran an adventure set in 1993 where basically they're given multiple plot hooks so that these player characters could decide what they wanted to pursue. Kitsune learned that there was this secret government project called Project Ego Trip. And what they were basically doing was reverse engineering the TARDIS technology. And they were trying to build their own TARDIS, and it looked like a pyramid. And we've mentioned in earlier games, by the way, on the channel, these pyramid time ships have popped up through history. So now we're seeing one get built, right? So she wants to look into that. But at that same time, one of the other plot hooks was that Rad um, is presented with this trail of breadcrumbs to find out who he is. And I can't remember if I said it already. He has amnesia. He wants to know why he has amnesia. He wants to know where he's from. He wants to know why the TARDIS works for him and nobody else, and so on and so forth. So the party splits. And so Kitsune goes her own way. She interacts with the 1980s Superboy, who, by the way, now, thanks to time travel, they're the exact same age. Um, and they go get involved with this ego trip stuff, right? Conversely, Rad starts following the trail of breadcrumbs, and it takes him a while. So by 1996, he he has gone on several adventures. He ends up in Japan, of all places, and he meets this woman. I always want to say her last name's Ellsworth. It's not Ellsworth, it's Elmsworth, kind of like Elm Street. Monica Elmsworth. And she also has amnesia. And there's a sense of familiarity between them. So this is a horrible analogy, but you know how, like in Back to the Future, Marty McFly kisses his mom in 1955 and it feels wrong. And she says it feels like I'm kissing my brother or whatever. these two have a feeling like that for each other, right? That is a non-romantic feeling. Um, I'm just gonna spoil it. They're mother and son. So when they are picking up a vibe with the other one, that's what it is. They're realizing they're related. They don't quite know how they're related yet. So she gets in the TARDIS. She has the amnesia, so it's kind of like her conscious mind doesn't know what the buttons do, but like subconsciously, if she takes a guess, she's like, right. So she gets this sense she's been in the TARDIS before, she's used it before. It acts like it recognizes her and responds to her touch and so on and so forth. And so they go on a series of adventures. And I could be really long-winded about that. I'm just gonna kind of skip forward to the end. So, because I don't want, I've been making some videos recently that are like an hour long, and I don't want to do that anymore. At any rate, they find out that she was a changeling and that she is actually the Morrigan from Celtic mythology, right? And if you follow our channel, you may recall, especially some of those earliest videos I uploaded were about the Morrigan and Dagda, and they were lovers in ancient Ireland, right? And they, through the ages, were known by different names. So, for instance, in Camelot, Dagda was known as King Arthur, and Morrigan became known as Morgan Le Fay. In the time of Shakespeare, they were Oberon and Titania from A Midsummer Night's Dream. And they were doing stuff in the Old West together. We mentioned that. And they were doing stuff in World War II together. And at any rate, in Morrigan's many, many adventures, because for those who are familiar with Celtic mythology, the Morrigan is like the goddess of war. She is a huge, uh, tough force to be reckoned with, right? She is massive. She is a cosmic being, literally. Well, so we had made her at one point as a changeling in the White Wolf system. And White Wolf made the Changeling the Dreaming role-playing game, and they also made um Vampire the Masquerade. And I can't remember what book it is in, but and this is old World of Darkness from the 90s. I'm not talking about anything after, the year 2000 or anything like that. But at any rate, one of the old books says that if a vampire bites a changeling, it will kill their fairy soul. It will destroy the soul. The changeling cannot withstand a vampire bite, except for the 1% who can. And so we decided that if this particular changeling had Morrigan as its soul, right, that she would be so powerful. If anyone could resist that, it would be her. Um, and we end up finding out that the vampire she tangled with was Cain, the first vampire, who is still running around in the modern day and the World of Darkness stuff. And for those who are not familiar with the World of Darkness games, which I would kind of assume would be the majority of people on the channel, when they made that role playing game, they decided to use Cain from the Bible, from the book of Genesis. And he was cursed by God. And the mark of Cain, as I understand it, again, feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but the mark of Cain, I believe, was something that allowed onlookers to sort of see there was something going on with this guy, right? And so then in the World of Darkness role-playing games, they said what that actually was like the pale skin and the fangs and all that vampire stuff, right? So he's the first vampire. He's the most powerful vampire. To put it in video game terms, he is the final boss. And so we thought if anybody would be messing with Morgan, it would be him, right? And that they would hate each other, absolutely. In terms of their goals and their motivations and alignments and all that stuff, they would despise one another. So they had fought, and he bit her, trying to kill her, so on and so forth. So this whole series of adventures, at the end of it, like I said, they were traveling through time to put all the pieces of this puzzle together. In the end, they go back to the year they left, which again was 1996. And part of what we were doing with that time stuff was we had screwed up our continuity where we had accidentally said, because we knew she was a vampire in the 90s, but then every once in a while we would like mention that she was a vampire in the Age of Pirates or something like that. And then later, when you got to the Old West, like she wasn't a vampire anymore. And so one of the reasons for the time travel was we were saying, okay, well, she got bitten at some point, and then she went back. So there were actually two of her in the Age of Pirates, where you know what I mean. We made it make sense. And again, if I'm not explaining it well enough, say something in the comments section, and I'll help you out. So point being, um, we get to the end of this whole thing, and the gist is that they go to the Nematon where John Redbridge is, because John Redbridge is the name Dagda goes by in the 90s, right? And so he is the captain of the Nematon. Um, and so this is his, in a way, it's his wife, like in a past life or whatever you want to call it, it was his wife, and their son, and who was a Dhampir, right? And so he brings them in. He's upset that they don't know who he is, so on and so forth. And so he finds out this is all the fault of Cain. So he is not very familiar with the Bible or the fact you're not supposed to screw with Cain. It actually says something about, how bad it is to go try to kill him. It's forbidden. And he tries. He's like, I'm going to go kill Cain. And again, for the people who are familiar with the World of Darkness, that's going to sound like just a ludicrous, insane kind of a thing, right? So here's sort of a semi brief aside that explains this. In the 90s, I was going to this college for a little while. I wasn't a student there. I was just hanging out there. As it just so happens, it's where David Bowie's kid also went to that college. Kind of weird. Um, but at any rate, the White Wolf stuff was very popular there. There was like a huge number of goth kids at this college. I had a lot of goth friends at the time, which was kind of funny because I was not at all goth. I was like, um, I don't know what, like I'd be in there wearing a Superman t-shirt, and everybody else was like all, long black hair and black trench coats, and you know what I mean? So it was kind of funny in a way. I didn't belong, but I got along really well with them. And so they were playing um live action role playing version of Vampire the Masquerade. So like at Halloween, they'd buy fangs and they'd buy makeup to paint their skin white and stuff like that. And this college campus was gorgeous, by the way. It was very, very nice, very large. Um, and so we kind of had our run of the place, and people were walking around doing their thing. But I didn't want to be a vampire, right? I wanted to do my own thing, and I was more or less doing the John Redbridge thing. It's that'd be a long story, not worth getting into, but I won't split hairs. I was doing the John Redbridge thing, just through a White Wolf lens, right? And at any rate, so the vampires wanted to kill me because I wasn't a vampire. The characters I met, and the players were fine with me, but their characters were always wanting to kill me. And so there was this guy running those games named Tom, and so he he came up with an idea that I think was actually kind of genius, which is we would play a game and he would come up with a number of points that was the total number of points the group earned that day instead of individually, right? And so they were like, okay. And he's like, all right, so I'm going to take half of those points and give them to the people playing vampires. And then I'm going to take half of those points and give it to the one guy who's not a vampire. And they were like, hey, whoa, what's up with that? And he's like, well, you all want to kill him. And I feel like we should be inclusive for people that want to play something other than a vampire. And they agreed with that. And they're like, okay, that's fine. So like and mind you, I couldn't even tell you how many kids we had playing this game. It was like 50 or something. It was like a huge number of kids. And I don't even remember now how experience points work in White Wolf, but like he was giving everybody else the standard average amount of points you'd get from playing a game. And then you take that and multiply that by like 50, and that's how many points I was getting every single game session, right? Which was fine because, like I said, we hadn't come up with the name Dagda yet. That's kind of the bottom line. We hadn't connected it quite to that character from mythology. I had just accidentally reinvented the wheel. You know what I mean? So this was one of the reasons we ended up connecting him to such a powerful character was because he did. He like in his first adventure he was in, he was like a starting level White Wolf character. And he's just by leaps and bounds. I mean, we're just because the way those uh the character sheets worked was it was all like circles you'd fill in like those old tests you would take in school where you had to pick, A, B, C, or D or whatever. Um, well, so you would have a skill for something like brawling or whatever it was. And so like one circle might mean you're bad at fighting, and two means you're like sort of okay, and three is like you're all right. And four is like you're good at fighting, and five is like you're the best, right? And so every game, he's like, here's how many circles you get to fill in this game session. So I'm just filling stuff out like crazy and I'm just maxing out. Um, and I hadn't gotten in any fights with anybody, you know. They were just sort of it was a game that was mostly people talking in character. So they would just say crappy things to me. I would kind of say crappy things back. To be really brutally honest, I was just kind of going to these games because there was like girls there. You know what I mean? So I was kind of just talking to girls and in character and stuff like that. But yeah. So the uh, ultimately like it was because I think he was graduating from college or whatever. And so he decided to end it with a bang. And so he brings in Kane. And um I said something to him and I'm like, well, this guy's like the ultimate evil, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, I have like all the points. I filled out like every circle on my character sheet. Like he had to make a house rule for me to be able to create my own circles because I ran out of things to fill in. You know what I mean? And it was getting to the point where I was having like every power I could possibly have, right? I was just in God mode, where I was like just maxed out in every sense of the word. So I'm like, cool. I see no reason why I would not kill Kane. And so we fought and had this big knockdown, drag out fight. And at the end of it, it seemed like Kane died. And it was left in such a way, because, like, for instance, there's Dracula movies where Dracula seems to be dead. And then they make another movie later where somehow somehow Palpatine returns, right? Um, so yeah, that was kind of the thing. And then um so we were inspired by those games at that college, and we were taking that concept and we were saying these are sort of like two parallel dimensions. So I wanted that to happen in our superhero game too. So we said, yes, Kane is a thing. Yes, John Redbridge fights him. Yes, Kane dies. And so as soon as we did that, then it's like Morgan is no longer, we went the route that they do in a lot of movies and stuff. That is, she's no longer a vampire, cures her. Um, Likewise, the son is no longer a vampire. He too is now cured. Um, all of the vampires in our game world that were related to Kane are no longer vampires. They turn human again, and a bunch of them are very happy about that. Not all of them, and some of them then, which I guess would be like the epilogue to the game. Some of them kind of go off on their own little quests to try to find other vampires. Like for instance, the Doctor Who space vampires or Marvel's Dracula or whatever. But their thing is, to go find other vampires, try to kind of wheel and deal with them, so that those guys will bite them and they can go back to doing what they want to do. But yeah, that was a pretty big moment for us in the 90s. Um, a lot of the uh, well, I'll put it this way: the guys that I played with at the college, the live action role playing stuff, they remember live action role playing fondly. Um, they all hated the ending. They didn't like the fact that Kane could be killed. That kind of ruined it for him. But up until the ending, it was like they went from we love this 100% to we hate this 100%. So yeah, that's it for this one. Hopefully you didn't hate this one 100%. Hopefully you thought it was amusing. If so, as always, we'd love it if you smashed the like button. Make sure you're still subscribed, and as always, leave us a comment. I'd be very curious to hear if you guys have played any White Wolf games. Did you play Vampire the Masquerade? Did you play Changeling the Dreaming or Werewolf the Apocalypse? Or maybe some of the new World of Darkness stuff, which I have never played the new stuff. Although I've been very tempted on several occasions, because as I understand it, the new Changeling is the flip side of the same coin as the old one. The old one, as I recall, is that there's some sort of a fairy spirit that kind of body jacks a human and kicks their soul out. And then that fairy lives the life the human should have lived. So my understanding is excuse me, I'm tongue tied. My understanding is that the new Changeling game is you are a human soul who finds himself in the fairy world and has a bunch of adventures. So I had thought different times about some of the characters I played that I really loved who were changelings, because we've done it kind of a lot actually. I've thought it would be really cool to see, well, whatever happened to those souls that got kicked out. But I haven't done it yet. So yeah, I'd be curious if anyone's played it. Let me know if it's any good. I might have to check that out. But yeah, that's it for us for now. Um, from everybody here associated with the game, we hope you guys have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.